everyone, Alex Donne here, and today I want to talk about the author-agent and author-editor relationship. Really, it's all about boundaries and remembering to approach your relationship with your agent, your editor, really any publishing professional, but gonna hone in on those two who you have the most interaction with as a business relationship. The clickbaity title is, your agent is not your friend, nor is your editor. And I do mean that, but not literally. But they also aren't your friend. They are friendly. You should have a friendly, convivial relationship, but they're not your bestie. They're not in your group chat. Your agent/editor aren't there for you to vent every single frustration with no filter, going off on rants or crying on their shoulder. Asterisk on that one with agents, etc. I think a lot of the time authors can forget that this is ultimately a business because writing is so personal to us. You know, it's our heart, it's our art, we're creative. And even though we're aware, of course, that it's a business, this is just so personal to us that we can sometimes fail to see the forest for the trees. Essentially, crossing boundaries with your agent, your editor, and treating them more like a friend and forgetting that they are ultimately a business relationship, business contact, can lead to all sorts of things that can actually hurt your career in the short and the long term. So I want to talk a bit more about these relationships, how they work as business relationships, and this is actually a part one. I started working on an outline for this, and this time I actually caught myself with a far too long outline. So I'm breaking this into two topics. The first is your agent, your editor, and the function of that as a business relationship and some best practices for kind of being careful with being friendly and being too friendly in those relationships. And then in a part two, unofficial part two, I'm gonna do a whole separate video on corporate business norms. In that video, I'll get super into the fun weeds of business communication, corporate media, and how it works and what are considered business norms there and how you might inadvertently rub people the wrong way if you go in all guns blazing or communicate with people in a specific way. At the end of the day, between these two videos, I hope you'll find yourself armed with some tips, some tricks, some best practices to protect yourself in the industry because we are really vulnerable and what you want is a long and fruitful career. Disclaimer up front, I'm not perfect. I'm not the 100% expert on any of this, though I have been trucking along in this business for 8 years, wow, since I got my second agent who sold my book. Longer if you consider before that, and I've been in the kind of publishing mechanism since I sold my first book in 2017. I've worked with 3 different editors, and my day job, I work in corporate media. I don't work in the publishing industry, but I work in an adjacent media. I'm very familiar with corporate business norms, and so especially in the part 2, I am actually looking forward to talking a lot about corporate media, business communication, best practices, etc. I do genuinely think it helps me, my day job, in how I communicate with my editor, my marketer, publicist, especially on the publisher side. Let's start right at the top with a critical reminder. Your literary agent is your business partner. It is a business relationship. It's mutually beneficial. You write things, they sell them, you both profit. They actively protect your interests in the publishing business because publishing is a business and it has its own agenda, own things that it wants, and the publishing side is always going to protect its interests. You have an agent as a middleman to basically advocate for you, and you both benefit. Now, fit is very important with an agent. It's important that you get along, that your communication styles match, that you don't frequently feel uncomfortable with your agent or intimidated by your agent or not heard by your agent. Lots of us have incredibly friendly relationships with our agents, but they're not our friends. They're not our besties. They are not the group chat, as I said. Essentially, your agent should never get your 100% unfiltered, full throttle, emotional thoughts and feelings. You should always bear in the back of your mind, it's a business relationship. Even if it's a friendly and close business relationship. I'm really friendly and close to my agent. We've been together now for 8 years. We text mostly about business, occasionally about personal, but there's always that boundary. We are in a business relationship together. She is not my best friend. She's not my family. The reason I'm talking about this, why I want to warn about this, is having a really close, too close, crossing lines friendly relationship with your agent can actually backfire on you. The thing about friendship, about really liking a person, being close to them, knowing intimate details about their strengths and weaknesses, their family, their background, all of their vulnerabilities, which ideally you can do in a really close friendship, is, well, you become afraid to essentially hurt their feelings, to wound them. You never want to wound a friend. Not that you want to wound a business contact, but business can be very black and white sometimes. Something that I have definitely seen. A client who is afraid to be honest and open with their agent when they are unhappy about something because they're friends. An agent who doesn't want to hurt their client's feelings and be completely honest about something because they're friends. If you do work up that courage to say something because there's that messy personal business boundary, you or they, let's say either of you say something, might lash out because it feels really, really personal because your relationship is messy like that. Even worse, they could take personal information, things that you have said to them in confidence, that you said to them as a friend that you wouldn't normally say to a business contact, and they can use it against you. Because let's be real, sometimes friendships blow up, they implode, you have a falling out where you no longer get along, and when that happens in a business relationship and you have all of this personal stuff, it can just get really, really messy. And speaking of messy, something I've actually heard of happening before, which chills the blood in my veins. It's horrifying. You can get so close, so personal, so friendly with your agent that it goes both ways. Your agent can start relying on you for emotional support, not just about business, about their personal life, and you can end up in this weird codependent relationship that is very unhealthy, not normal, and is, I guarantee you, going to harm your business interests. Because here's the thing about agents and part of what their jobs are. I mentioned it, they are a middleman. And while they are 100% your advocate, part of their job is to know the business better than you do. As much as I'm gonna go all into corporate media norms, the thing is when you get a really good agent, you don't have to know all of that stuff. It is helpful, so I'm gonna share, but you don't have to know all of that stuff and be perfect and know how everything works, because that is your agent's job. And very often, part of your agent's job is actually to keep you in check. Not like they're your mother and not strictly like they're your boss. It is a symbiotic business relationship of equals or near equals. But sometimes as the person who knows more about the industry, has more experience, and is protecting your interests, they have to protect you from yourself. They need to be able to look at a situation knowing you decently well, because you're friendly with your agent, remember, but you're not best friends, and knowing your editor, knowing the publisher, and knowing what's the norm, and view things generally neutral, as a neutral third party. And then they have to navigate what they say to you and what they say to your publisher and streamline that communication so that everyone can get along well while the mutual parties come out more or less both getting what they want. It is incredibly difficult, if not impossible, for an agent to do their job well in terms of working professionally with a publisher if they are your bestie and they no longer can see both sides, essentially. Yes, they are your advocate and they should go to bat for you. They should bad cop for you like a champion. They should have your back, but sometimes it will work against you if they lash out emotionally, rashly, because you're upset, and they go right over to your publisher and they scream at them, they yell at them, they etc, etc, etc. That can ultimately harm both of your relationships with the publisher. You need your agent to remain professional, emotionally even keel, able to kind of see a situation, evaluate, and handle it appropriately. I could go on and on about a million scenarios where I've seen two friendly, close relationships between editor and author, or an author misunderstanding the role of their agent and crossing boundary lines and making their agent uncomfortable. You could go on and on and on. But just to reinforce, never forget that it is a business relationship. Repeat after me. Friendly, not friends. Or not best friends. Friendly, not best friends. Because you can absolutely be friends with professional and business contacts, but you're not besties with them. That, you know that old saying, like, don't ish where you eat, so to speak? Trying to be slightly clean, even though I curse all the time. Don't shit where you eat. It's a similar idea. Don't cross those personal boundary lines in your business relationships in author world either. It just gets messy. Now I want to talk a little bit about emotionality in a business relationship, specifically with agents. And another repeat after me. Your agent is not your therapist. Your agent is not your therapist. Look, they are human and you are human, and there's inevitably going to be an emotional component to your relationship. And in fact, what makes agent-author relationships so tricky, I think, is that you actually should be emotional with your agent. You should be vulnerable with your agent. They should be someone who you are comfortable being vulnerable and honest with, but they're not your therapist. You can't go all the way, so to speak. You're not lying on a couch telling them your entire life story and bleeding your heart out to them. Boundaries are just so important in the author-agent relationship. They need to know just enough to understand where you're coming from, how you're feeling, what is going on in publishing. You know, maybe they have been copied on an email and something happened and you need to let them know. They have to know just enough to do their job, to advocate for you, to be that funnel, that support in the business relationship, but not so much that you make them feel uncomfortable or awkward, or in the worst case scenarios that you're not giving them weird ammunition to use against you. Because the danger zone is one emotional burst too many that makes them uncomfortable, that crosses a line for them, saying the wrong thing, something that inadvertently insults them, or being so emotional to the point that you're out of control, that you make rash decisions and you do things that makes it harder for them to do their job, things that damage your relationship with your publisher. If you don't practice healthy emotional boundaries in your interactions with your agent, you can end up losing them as your agent. Epic rants or vent sessions are for friends and family. Practice, and remind yourself to tell them kind of, the meat of something, but tell them as professionally as possible. You have to gauge kind of the vibe in your relationship, of course. I'm a little more casual with my agent sometimes on text, but also because we've worked together for 8 years. But you just kind of have to make your best judgment call and save all of the good stuff, the going on and on about it, the really processing, the kind of processing you do in therapy or with really close friends. I mean, save it for therapy or very close friends, just to protect yourself. I'm coming at you with all of this as someone who can be incredibly emotional. I can totally get in a flap. I can be paranoid sometimes. I'll interpret something that's happened in publishing in the worst possible way, and I'll spin all of these conspiracy theories, or I'll catastrophize. I'm very good at it. It's a talent. I can absolutely get on a real tear and I can spiral, but I have friends, publishing friends, writer friends, which are essential, by the way. And if you don't have those, hopefully you have a very understanding family member who will maybe learn a lot about publishing as you complain to them about publishing or worry about things in publishing with them. But it's been really important to establish those boundaries with my agent so that we can have a more fruitful relationship. I tell her things, I'm vulnerable with her, and she validates my feelings, but isn't going, tell me more, because she's not my therapist, remember? It's not her job. My tip essentially is to just always bear in mind, if you have to talk to your agent about something like really emotional for you, first of all, consider venue. Is it going to be easier for you to get something in writing where maybe you can look at it and edit it and make sure it's kind of pared down? Or if, like me, you write ridiculously epic emails, maybe in a weird way a phone call would be better, because having the feedback cycle, the person actually literally responding to you, kind of tempers your emotion and the way that you're going to be talking and processing something. Figure out whatever means of communication you think is going to work best for you and how you are feeling. Get out the meat of it, and then just always remind yourself, I'll tell the rest to my friends. I'll say this in the most professional way possible so that my agent can hear me and validate me and help me, and then I'll get everything else out with friends. So your agent is your business partner. It is a professional relationship, but you do have to be close enough and vulnerable enough, friendly enough that they can best advocate for your interests. Now let's talk about editors, because take everything I said about your agent relationship and multiply it with your editor. Again, because your agent is that middleman for you, you should rarely be dumping emotions, personal stuff onto your editor. I think it gets really tricky with editor relationships and generally with publisher relationships, because there's even more of like a wall between you as the author, you as a person, you personally, and the business. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what an editor's role literally is at a publisher and kind of some of the business constraints that they have to work with, the things that they are juggling, so you can better kind of contextualize, maybe that's why my editor ultimately is not my friend. Friendly, not friend. Friendly, not friend. Friendly, not best friend. Also not therapist. If your agent isn't your therapist, your editor is absolutely never your therapist. So what is your editor's job at a publisher? They are the front of the line between all the business stuff at a publisher. Every department you can think of, and the author. They're the ones with their hands in your book. Their job is to read your book, identify issues, and work through the revision editorial process with you. But also to work through things like deadlines, being a conduit between you and the marketing department, the publicity department, etc., etc., etc. They are your in-house advocate as an author and for your books. When they have something that's called launch, which is where they all come into a room and they talk about the titles for the next upcoming season, your editor is the one who goes in and talks about your book and gets people hyped up for it. Yes, they are your advocate, but they are an advocate in a totally different way that your agent is your advocate. Your agent advocates for your interests and you mutually benefit each other. Now you'd think, well, of course, your editor, you would also mutually benefit each other. Yes, but the thing is, an editor at a publishing house has to deal with so much corporate bullshit. There's so much that kind of goes into the business, and I'm gonna call it the corporate funnel, and they are at the bottom of the funnel. Publishing is a business. I know I've said this a million times, but I really want you to realize what a cold, cruel, capitalist business it is. Like capitalism in general, like any business. And all the way at the tippy top are people who don't know you, don't know your name, don't know your book, don't care about your book really. Like they abstractly care about you and your book because you make them money, and they're all the way at the top. And the capitalism corporate funnel, it funnels all the way down through lots of different departments, all the way down to your editor, who is often overworked, almost always overworked and underpaid, especially when they're a lower level editor. You can work your way up to senior levels of editorial, and then they make definitely a decent salary, but it's still pretty ridiculous. Your editor cares about you and your book more than most people above them in the corporate funnel because it's personal. You work together. They are going to get to know you on a certain level, at least enough so that you can have a fruitful business relationship, and they care about the success of the book because if you succeed, they also succeed, typically. But They operate under a corporate mandate that's funneled down to them, which is to temper bad news, to, how do I say this nicely? Editors are not villains. Most lower level employees at publishers are not villains, but part of their job is in fact to gaslight you. We love them, but there is so much gaslighting in publishing, and that's again why we love our agents, because that's another part of the filter that they operate as a business relationship. They interpret and sanity check you, because editors' jobs are to say certain things to you and your agent in certain ways to obscure and temper information, because we, the authors, we are creatives, we can be very emotional, we care deeply about our books, but it is a cruel, cold business. And so editors have a really hard job. They are a middleman where they both have to care almost as much as you do, but they also have to be cold and hard, and they're under the boot of capitalism, and part of their job is to keep you in line. Any corporate environment is going to be complicated. People are always going to be juggling a lot of things, and so your editor is juggling, trying to do their job well, trying to have a life outside of this crazy overworked schedule and afford to eat and pay rent and move up in the ladder. They want to advance their career. There are weird power structures at every single publisher and personal stuff where some editors have more clout and so in this department likes them more, so their books are more likely to be lead titles, and they're just a million different things that your editor has to deal with as someone who has a corporate grind mixed with creative job, and they juggle all of that constantly, and their job is really hard. So having vomited all of that at you, do you see what I mean when I say that your editor is not your friend? You have both commingling and competing interests. If there's another book in-house that is going to make more money, whether it's your editor's book or not, part of their job is to support the machine that supports the books that make the most money. It's deeply unfair. I mean, it's just capitalism. With all of this in mind, I mean, there's a million reasons why you shouldn't trauma dump on your editor or be overly emotional or personal with your editor. But one is that they're already dealing with so much stuff, and they can't manage your emotions in that way. It is literally not their job. It's more your agent's job, or honestly, editors don't care how that stuff gets managed. They expect you to conduct yourself professionally most of the time. Another thing I want you to bear in mind is if you're, overly personal with your editor, maybe you do get very friendly with your editor, and maybe there's boundary crossing on both sides. This goes both ways, by the way. If you as an author feel that an agent is trying to be your friend, feel that an editor is trying to be your friend in a way that feels inappropriate, listen to your gut, because those negatives I mentioned with agents, that can happen with editors too. They could take something that you say in confidence and they can use it against you on the business side, and that's the last thing you want to have happen. Vice versa. I've definitely seen cases where an editor uses personal stuff to try to guilt an author into not pressing them for not doing their job, for example. Editors are not perfect. It just gets messy when you mix the personal and the professional, and you're never going to have a 100% professional relationship. Personal is always going to play a role, but you need to just ensure that you establish boundaries, you keep boundaries, you work with your agent on those boundaries. It's basically a scale. You can be close-ish and friendly with your agent and vulnerable with your agent in part so that they can protect your interests, so that you don't have to and don't do any of that with your editor to protect your professional business relationship with the evil corporate funnel. Ultimately, truly, this advice is about protecting you, protecting us. I mean, I'm an author. I'm an emotional person who is an author. And just always remembering that professional line and that this is a business is going to save you from showing your ass and having bad shit happen in your professional career. The thing about a friend or about family is they know you, they like you, hopefully they love you, and you can show them the worst parts of yourself and they will still love you, still care. Although sometimes they don't. We've all had a friendship fall apart. Or at least that's definitely the ideal, especially for a friendship. The thing with professional relationships, you can show them your worst self and they can walk away. Being completely emotionally vulnerable, being overly personal, tends to lead to myriad issues in professional business relationships. So it's always going to be a balancing act. There's a line and you just have to figure out how to navigate and walk it. And an eternal reminder, what can help so much with this is having good publishing friends. That is my recommendation for so many things that happen in publishing. Surround yourself with good friends. It is not easy. I know I've made videos on it in the past. People always ask me, and I don't think I have great or new advice other than you just have to navigate the messy waters of author friendships, figure out who's a real one, and there's a lot of trial and error. We've all had heartbreak. We've all met our share of social climbers and etc., etc. But when you find your people, your good people, those are the people you can be fully yourself with. You can vent and feel all the things. You can be your worst self with a good publishing friend, and they're going to be everything that you need in that moment so that you can then present a more polished version of your feelings to your agent, and then they can present an even more polished version of your feelings to your editor to get things done in the business relationship. That is the ideal. Much like a worst case scenario, I feel like this video was a little bit messy. It's difficult to talk about this topic because there's so many different ways that it can go wrong, and I actually feel really bad telling you you can't be friends with your agent. Friendly, not friends, just repeat that over and over again. And also because relationships are nuanced. But I have seen some legitimate horror stories both in the author-agent relationship and in the author-editor relationship where just exercise caution, protect yourselves. And stay tuned for that next video where I'm just gonna have so much fun talking about business communication. We're gonna talk about emails and follow-ups and corporate culture and vibes. I really do enjoy this stuff, so stay tuned, look forward for that. Would love to hear your thoughts down below in the comments. And as always, guys, thank you so much for watching and happy writing.